Hi, I'm Chris Walker with Rio Products, and thanks for watching another episode of our how-to series. This episode is all about fishing in difficult places, and there's a lot of reasons a place can be difficult to fish, but in this case, we're talking specifically about casting obstructions. So if you find yourself out in the middle of a wide open space like this, you might be able to make really long, beautiful, tight-looped overhead casts with no trouble at all, mostly because there's nothing around to get stuck in. But if you move into places that have more obstructions, it could be overhanging branches or a big rock behind you or even some kind of obstruction in front of you, then you'll have to adjust your approach a little bit just so you can get the fly to the fish without getting it stuck in any of those nasty places. So let's go take a look at a few of those places around this stream here, and we'll give you an example of how to fish each of them. This spot here is a great example of a place where I might use a side cast. So if I were to make a straight up and down overhead cast here, my loop would unfurl nice and high and it would probably land in the tree, which I obviously don't want. So to avoid that, I'll make a side cast, which is simply dropping the rod down to the side like this and casting on the sideways plane. And that allows me to sneak the fly in there under the trees, get it where the fish like to live, and hopefully stay clear of this obstacle. Now we'll move on to another spot where a side cast is necessary. So now I'm in another spot where the side cast is necessary. If I were to do just a straight up and down overhead cast, I'd actually hit the trees with my rod, never mind my line. So once again, I'll just drop the rod down on this sideways plane here, make a nice little side cast to keep my loop and leader clear of all these obstructions. So again, you can see the loop is unfurling now over just clear water rather than through the trees. Now let's go check out another spot where I have to use a non-conventional cast to get out of trouble. So now I'm in a spot where I can't do an overhead cast or a side cast. If I were to do an overhead cast, my back cast would go into the trees and bushes behind me. If I were to do a side cast, I risk getting tangled up with this rock here. So really the best back cast in this situation is no back cast at all. And what I'll do in this situation is simply a roll cast. So you can see, because I don't make any back cast at all, I don't get in any of the trouble back here with the rock or the bushes. Simply just put my anchor down, make a little flick, and a roll cast will put the fly right back out into the middle of the river. Now, if you're unclear on how to do a roll cast, there's a great video in our how-to series on our website that you can check out for a little refresher. Let's go look at one more even tougher place to get a fly. Now we're in a spot that's so tight I can't do an overhead cast, side cast, or a roll cast. And in these situations, the one I'll go to is what's called the bow and arrow cast. And the way you start this one is you hold the fly in your hand, point the rod where I want the fly to go, and you can see I've got about as much leader and line out as the length of the rod, maybe just a little bit more. And I'll just quickly pull the fly back to load the rod, let it go, and you can see it pings out there, and I've made a nice bow and arrow cast. Now the hardest part, as you can see, is getting the fly back to reset, because I've got all these branches in the way, but by sticking the rod up in the air, I can kind of swing it back over, get the fly in hand to reset for another bow and arrow. Now let's take a look at one more place where I have to do something a little bit different in order to get the fly to the fish. The last technique we'll use here is called controlled drag. And this is great for getting a fly under something that's actually not possible to cast underneath. So as you can see here, there's an overhanging branch that's going over a really nice deep slot. And that branch is so low to the water, there's just no way I'm gonna be able to get a fly under it with a cast. So what I'll do instead is, with my line kind of washed downstream of me here, I'll start sending mends in towards the bank. And I'll just do this a bunch of times in succession. And you can see now the current has dragged my line over in line with that branch. And now I'll simply let it drift under there. And there's the line going right under the spot where I hope that fish is gonna take my fly. So that's the controlled drag technique. And thanks for watching this episode of Rio's How-To series. Hopefully you've learned some interesting tips and pointers for how to fish the most difficult spots, whether that's because you have an obstructed back cast or an obstruction on your side, or maybe so many obstructions that you can't make a cast at all or need to do a bow and arrow cast. Those techniques have all come in handy for me in my fishing over the years, and hopefully they'll do the same for you. If you liked what you saw in this episode, you can check out the rest of the series online at rioproducts.com. Thanks for watching.